Hello everybody, it's Darren Antill again from Device Authority. I have the pleasure this afternoon of introducing Alastair. Alastair and I have known each other for several years now, and in fact we have a common investor, so we're quite well aware of each other's businesses, but I'm delighted to invite Alastair and for Wyld to participate today. I've always been impressed and encouraged by the use cases specifically, which I think is very relevant to the 3-day event. So without further ado, Alastair, I'll pass over to you and thank you for joining us. And I hope everyone enjoys your talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Really appreciate you letting me onto your webinar series. So my name's Alastair Williamson. I'm the CEO of Wyld Networks, and I have a presentation that really is focusing on satellite IoT and focusing on a specific use case. And the use case is really about how satellite IoT solutions can enhance food and water security and improve climate action. And the vertical I've picked is actually agriculture. So I'm focusing on a very narrow use case, but mainly in agriculture, looking at food and water security and improving climate action in agriculture. But just a bit about Wyld and who we are. So Wyld, we're a virtual satellite operator connecting IoT devices anywhere in the world. So we're leveraging low Earth orbiting satellites to connect our customers' IoT devices anywhere in the world. We were formed in Cambridge in 2016. End of Q1 this year, we had 31 employees. We listed the company on the Nasdaq First North in Stockholm in July 2021, and also on the OTCQB in the United States in May 2022. Now, as I said, we are a virtual satellite operator, so we have partnerships with satellite operators that provide us with with bandwidth, and obviously our technology is incorporated into their satellites. So we've partnered with satellite operators such as Eutelsat, Lacuna, DEWA, and Astrocast, and they've basically got a low Earth orbiting constellation of satellites supporting our technology. So we launched the network in December last year. So about 6 months ago, the end of December, we launched our satellite IoT network. And we're building quite a substantial order backlog. We have about 92 million krona worth of backlog, and I'll go through that backlog and I'll go through our business model as well. My apologies for using krona, but we are listed on the Nasdaq First North in Stockholm, so krona is the currency that we actually use. But today we support LoRaWAN as a technology connecting IoT devices to satellites, but we are we are planning to basically add 5G capability towards the end of this year. So that's Wyld, but what do we solve? And really simply, our rationale for being here. I think you all realize that the IoT global market is pretty massive, and it's set to reach about $106 billion by 2026, with over 125 billion IoT devices being deployed annually by 2030. However, the problem is that only 15% of the world's surface has wireless coverage or access to the internet to allow those IoT devices to send data, or for our customers to collect data from those IoT devices. Now, the majority of that wireless coverage is obviously in cities and suburban areas, but 85% of the world's surface has got no access to the internet, and they can't connect their IoT devices to collect their data. And it's this lack of global connectivity that's actually holding back, in my opinion, the growth of IoT from adding about $2 to $3 trillion to GDP by 2030. So what we developed is a solution called Wyld Connect, which is, and I'll be clear about this, is an affordable wireless solution that connects our customers' IoT sensors and devices to low Earth orbiting satellites to provide 100% global coverage. So we offer our customers the ability to deploy their IoT devices anywhere in the world. Obviously, most specifically in that 85% of the world's surface that got no access to the internet today. So the key drivers in the markets is, I think everyone's aware that there's obviously a massive explosion in the need to collect data from anywhere in the world, and our customers are using that data primarily for two things. It's really about how to improve their operational efficiency and reduce costs, but also it's about how our customers can collect data to meet their environmental and sustainability goals. So, as you can imagine, our use cases and target markets are in those verticals where our customers have assets in that 85% of the world's surface where there's no access to the internet today or no wireless coverage. So that is agriculture, energy, utilities, logistics, and the environment. And there are literally thousands of different use cases out there. But what I wanted to do today was to focus on agriculture and focus on food and water security and climate action in agriculture, and just take you through a use case per se that focuses on agriculture and those three particular issues. So if we look at agriculture, we look at food insecurity. So our population today is about 7.6 billion. And it's set to rise to about 9.8 billion by 2050. So another 2 billion people on the planet by 2050. However, today, already, over 200 million people face severe food shortages. So we can't even feed ourselves today. And we've got another 2 billion people that we need to feed by 2050. So there is a problem. It needs solving. And technology is going to be part of the solution to that problem. So that's food insecurity in agriculture. When we look at climate action in agriculture, agriculture is responsible for the emission of about 3.8 billion tons of CO2 equivalents or greenhouse gases every year. So, you know, we traditionally look at CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas, and we point to aeroplanes, and we point to cars, and we point to smokestacks. But what we need to be doing is also looking at agriculture, because if you take that 3.8 billion, that represents about 8% of all CO2 equivalent emissions globally every year. So it's a big contributing factor. The third point is water availability. And this will astonish you to know that 70% of all fresh water that's drawn is actually consumed in agriculture. So 70% of all the global fresh water that's actually drawn out is consumed in agriculture or used in agriculture. And in agriculture, 30% of that fresh water is wasted. So we need to focus on, once again, how technology can support water availability or water security. So if I look at those three use cases in particular, let's focus on food insecurity. So today we produce about 4.2 billion tons of crop every year. Now, to feed that population by 2050, the additional 2 billion people, we need to produce about another 2.1 billion tons of crop. Now, we're using satellite IoT technology to focus on multiple applications, such as increasing yields on the same footprint. But one of those applications is identification of early stage pests. So we're combining satellite IoT devices and satellite imagery to basically provide growers and farmers and producers with data. And based on just that crop loss prevention use case on identification or early identification of pests using satellite IoT, our use case shows that we could basically save about 400 million tons of crop annually. And that's sort of, you know, when you start to scale that up, you know, potentially we could take that 400 million tons of crop saved by eradicating pests up to somewhere close to 800 million tons of crop. So that's quite a substantial percentage of that 2.1 billion that we're actually saving in the loss of crop. So that represents something between 20 to 40% of that 2.1 billion that's needed. And that's just a very small use case in supporting that gap of ensuring that we've got enough crop to feed the population in 2050. If we look at climate action, so climate action, agriculture is responsible for about 3.8 billion tons of CO2 equivalent emissions every year. And about 1 billion tons of that CO2 equivalent emissions actually comes from fertilizers and pesticides. So it actually comes from input into farming. That fertilizer and pesticide actually creates about 1 billion CO2 equivalent emissions every year. And by using satellite IoT or using IoT sensors combined with other solutions as imagery, we can reduce those inputs by about 4 to 6% overall. And reducing that input, that's the inputs of pesticides and fertilizer, by 4 to 6% represents a reduction of over 500 million tons of CO2 equivalents. So we can reduce that 1 billion, which is derived from inputs, fertilizers and pesticides, by half by actually using IoT to provide growers and producers with informed information and data. And then if we look at water availability, as I said, 70% of all fresh water that's withdrawn actually is consumed in agriculture. So globally, we consume or withdraw about 40 billion litres every year, of which 28 billion litres is withdrawn and used in agriculture, primarily for irrigation. Now, we're deploying IoT sensors, such as soil moisture sensors, that are getting deployed into farms that are actually measuring the content of moisture or water that's currently in the ground. And based on that data, we're giving our customers the ability to optimize their irrigation and potentially save up to 2.8 billion litres of fresh water from being used in over-irrigating. So, 2.8 billion litres of, saving of fresh water, it doesn't sound like an awful lot, but if you actually look at that, that's 10% of all fresh water that's consumed in agriculture. But that's 2.8 billion litres of fresh water that we can actually save based on the 40 billion that's used globally across every industry. I think that's given you sort of a view on just the use case piece in agriculture. But to give you an idea of what does that mean for satellite connectivity, what does it mean for Wyld and other satellite providers for IoT? In agriculture alone, today the size of the market is about $500 million US, and that's growing pretty dramatically. And in agriculture alone, which is just one specific use case that we're addressing, we believe by 2030, the size of that market is going to grow to about $1 billion US. So just to summarize this use case in agriculture for enhancing food and water security and improving climate action using satellites and IoT solutions, we believe that satellites and technology and IoT could address and solve up to 30% of that food gap that's projected by 2050. So addressing that additional 2.1 billion worth of tonnage of crop that's going to need to be produced to feed us by 2050. So that's a significant percentage that technology supports in addressing that gap. The technology also helps reduce waste of global fresh water, as I just went through before. It addresses, it helps us reduce about 10% of the fresh water that's used in agriculture. About 2.8 billion litres of water can be saved, but that's still a significant percentage of the global use of water, which is about 40%. Using satellite IoT technology, we can lower agricultural CO2 emissions by up to about 500 million tons yearly. And using the solution, we can also reduce grower costs by about 5%, which represents about 7 to 8 billion US dollars saving each year just for the growers themselves. So there's obviously societal benefits, but with societal benefits do come these economic returns. Just focusing on food waste reduction and increase in yield of crop on the same footprint, which is very important. We don't want to grow more on larger footprints. We want to grow more on the same footprint. So just the economic returns on food waste reduction and yield increase could contribute anywhere between 150 to 175 billion US dollars in economic value for farmers and producers. And as I said earlier on, just in agriculture alone for satellite IoT solution, the market is really rapidly taking off, and it will double up to about $1 billion US dollars in 2030. And just to give you an idea if we take British American Tobacco as a producer, they contract out to about 90,000 farms, and they're looking for about 4 soil moistures per farm. So you get an idea of the number of devices that they're looking to put out into the fields. It's about 360,000 soil moisture sensors, all of which are going to be deployed in areas where there's no connectivity. So they're going to be using satellite IoT solutions or Wyld to collect their data. So that's a summary of just one particular use case, but I wanted to just now focus on, well, what does Wyld do? So if you look at our solution, we're providing our customers with 100% connectivity for their IoT devices anywhere in the world. So we've developed, there's several products to it. There is the Wyld Connect module and sensor, which is basically a device, a module or a terminal that's embedded into an IoT sensor that collects data from the IoT sensor. And today we use LoRaWAN as a technology to send that data to a low Earth orbiting satellite. Sometime this year, we'll implement 5G NB-IoT into the module and terminal, and we're using that capability, that technology, to also send data to low Earth orbiting satellites. As a satellite passes over a ground station, it sends the data to a ground station and to a product we have called Wyld Fusion, which is a cloud-based platform that provides device onboarding, network management, and from Wyld Fusion, we then deliver that data to our customers that have paid for that data. They use that data to do their data analytics and make informed decisions on multiple use cases. But if we have a look at the products themselves within the solution, I talked about the Wyld Connect module and the Wyld Connect terminal. So there's a picture of the Wyld Connect module. It's a small embedded module. Today it supports LoRaWAN ground to satellite. It also supports LoRaWAN terrestrial as well. And towards the end of the year, it will support 5G NB-IoT. So we charge our customers, it's about $40 US per module. And then on the terminal side, which is basically the module plus a lot more electronics in there, solar power, battery backup, some more computing resource. The terminal, as I say, same application, except it's really being used by customers that want to connect an existing IoT sensor and deliver that data to satellite. But we support LoRaWAN with that terminal, and obviously we will support 5G NB-IoT in the future moving forward this year. We charge our customers about $500 US per terminal. There's one thing to remember, when these devices go out into the field, they're going out there for 5 years, 7 years. There's no mains electricity. These are devices that are very low power consuming devices. They'll have battery backup. They may have solar on them, but they're not going into locations where there's mains electricity. The third component is the data piece, and that's really what our customers pay us to basically collect their data via our satellite IoT network. So our customers pay us that's up to $5 per module or terminal per month, and that's where we get our reoccurring revenue, and that's our reoccurring business model. So those are the three components that we take to market. And if we look at where we are today, we launched the network in December 2022. We've been building up a pretty aggressive order backlog. First 5 months of the year, we've built that up to 92 million kroner. We've got orders for about 226,500 modules, Wyld Connect modules, and we've got orders for about 3,000 terminals. So those 230,000 devices that are going out into the field, they'll be basically attracting, each of them will be attracting up to $5 per month per device. And so we expect that our revenues, yes, early revenues will be coming from the hardware, the modules, the terminals, but that will be pretty quickly overtaken by the data revenue, which is obviously the monthly fee that customers pay to use the network. We're looking to ramp up shipment, and we're expecting shipments to be in Q3 this year. And to give you an idea of the sort of market we're going after, we currently at this moment in time have a pipeline of opportunities ranging from sort of like 10% up to 90% of about 360 million kroner, and that's obviously changing on a daily basis and growing. So there is a real substantial large market out there, and we're aggressively picking it up as we move along. Just to give you an idea of use cases and locations, you know, as I said, primarily we're focusing on customers that have got assets in the 85% of the world's surface that has got no access to the internet. So if you look at the right-hand side, agriculture, oil and gas, metering, forestry, and wind energy, those are the use cases that we're currently really focusing on at the moment. We are looking to move into the logistics piece, which is interesting because it really adds another use case to the food security piece in basically ensuring we can actually move from farm to fork. But as you can see, about 42% is actually coming out of agriculture, 27% is coming out of oil and gas. Oil and gas is really interesting. A lot of use cases in measuring corrosion on oil and gas pipes. So preventative maintenance, being able to understand when those pipes will leak to actually, well, reduce loss of oil and gas, but also to protect the environment. So there's a lot of work being done on the corrosion monitoring piece, but there's also a lot of work being done on oil tank level monitoring, metering, particularly in rural areas, in electricity metering and gas metering. Forestry, we do a lot in forestry, and also wind energy is starting to become very popular. People are really looking to collect data from their turbines. But if I look at the left-hand column, the left-hand side of the slide, it's about where are we selling. So really it's where you'd expect. It's South Africa, Brazil, Egypt, Oman, and the US. Now, the US is obviously a very big territory for us. But our focus, you know, has primarily been on Latin America, the United States, and the Middle East, and a bit of Africa. And we're now starting to move this year into Asia Pac. But I talked earlier about the fact that we support LoRaWAN as a technology, and we're adding 5G NB-IoT as a technology to our solution. So, you know, in the LPWAN, the low power wide area networking technology, which is all IoT based, LoRaWAN is forecast to represent about 36% of the whole technology share of LPWAN. So we're using LoRaWAN at the moment, but as you can see, 5G NB-IoT is looking to represent probably about 47% of LPWAN technology. So we're building 5G NB-IoT onto the module so we can actually support both LoRaWAN and 5G NB-IoT. Great thing about it, it more than doubles the addressable market for Wyld for up to about $1.3 billion by 2025, the next couple of years. And also what it does is it moves us into another sector, which is really supporting the mobile operators who have bought 5G licenses. They've spent billions of pounds on these 5G licenses. They've got a nice slither of frequency for 5G NB-IoT. So we can offer the mobile operators the ability to connect their customers, IoT customers, once they're outside the coverage of 5G at the moment. So just to give you an idea of where we are, predominantly we are focused on the United States or North America, not to forget Canada. We're focused on Latin America, and we're focused on the Middle East, South Africa, and some countries in Europe. But you can see there that in as much as we're focused, I've talked about Brazil being a large market, but we're also deployed in lots of other countries from Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, the US, Canada, Saudi, the UAE, South Africa. We have a deployment also in Bangladesh, but as I say, the plan to start to expand into Asia Pac is probably going to start towards the end of the year. So hopefully that's given you an insight into Wyld and what we do, but hopefully it's also given you an insight into a particular use case which is quite important to us, which is really agriculture and how we use technology to support food security, water security, and fight climate action. So thank you very much indeed, and I'll take some questions. I don't have any. So if anyone does have any questions, just pop them in onto the BrightTalk website, and I'll be happy to answer them. Right, they're coming in now. So this is great. From a cybersecurity perspective, how vulnerable is your satellite infrastructure to malicious intrusions? So this is really interesting, and this is a conversation that Darren and I have had for some time, and I believe that not enough emphasis has been put onto when I talk about security of food and security of water, a really great subject is actually security of those assets. And, we're in discussions with Darren and DA in particular on how DA can actually support Wyld in deploying its infrastructure. So I'll just see if there's any more questions come in. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So, Darren, shall I hand back over to yourself? Okay, with no further questions, so I thank you very much for your time, and my email address is actually on the last slide. If you want to drop me an email, I'll be more than happy to pick up any questions you have. So it's alastair.williamson@wyldnetworks.com. Okay, thank you very much indeed.